Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here. So it is time for a 007 First Light. Is it platinum worthy? I have finished the game at this point. Even though I have not finished it on the YouTube side of things, I have finished it like in real time, obviously. Uh, I know it doesn't seem like that, but again, like these episodes, I usually prefer to be at around the hour and a half mark, but it's just something that I just cannot do with PSI specifically, especially without any sort of capture card or anything like that. Now, of course, we're going to be answering the question, is it platinum worthy? I'm going to be discussing different aspects of the game. I'm going to start with no spoilers and then get into spoilers later. In the background gameplay, y'all will be seeing three different sections of the game. First, of course, we have an extremely early section, essentially the tutorial in a way. Not in a way, it's basically a tutorial. And then you'll be seeing something kind of towards what I define to be the end of early game, and then a different section that's going to be, it can either be defined as the end of mid game or the beginning of late game. That's more so I'm going to start talking a little bit more spoiler territory, that sort of thing, but that's going to be a little bit later. Now, outside of that, I'm going to be working on a pretty good Destiny 2 project here. So I know I haven't made any videos on the Monument of Triumph event, but just keep in mind I'm working on like sort of a last hurrah kind of little. I'm working on a little bit of a project thing currently. So stage one is complete, but again, I gotta record some footage for it and whatnot. So just bear with me. It's kind of hard. Like this project in particular is kind of difficult for me personally to do. So just keep that in mind and bear with me. Now the 007. First off, is it platinum worthy? In case y'all new to this style of video, I answered that question right away and then go into my reasons. But I do think it's platinum worthy. The trophies are not terribly difficult to get or anything like that. So, and the game's pretty fun as a whole. I have not tried out TaxSim because the game kind of force launches and offline. I kept having issues with trying to launch the game online, so I have not tried those. But the rest of the game as a whole is fantastic. I don't think any of it is terribly difficult or anything like that. So, and it doesn't require like some weird stuff like how Doom Eternal's required battle mode. So, other than that though, I do think it's platinum worthy. Now, in terms of review, we're going to start with visuals. This is more so we're going to discuss, usually this is where I would talk about art style, enemy designs, variants, that sort of thing. Doesn't have necessarily fantastical elements, so I don't need to get into that too much with that. But here is where I'm going to talk about things like performance this time and that sort of thing, because there is some notable performance issues with this game. But keep in mind, for this discussion, I played this on PS5, so your experience on PC might be different. Also, for PS5, I have my console itself set to graphics, and then every game I have set to performance. So this 007 was no exception. The environments look really, really good. The destruction elements are really good as well. There are some times where it looks a little bit low quality, but other than that, it looks pretty good, especially the environments and whatnot. However, my main issue with on the performance end is for graphically what it looks like. Honestly, I thought it would have looked a lot better considering the load times are actually quite long. Considering like other games of the style and that sort of thing, the load times are actually quite substantial. Which those load times make death feel very, very punishing when you fail certain sections. So that is something that I did want to point out here. So, but other than that, graphically, looks really good, that sort of thing. Car design's pretty solid, but, that's kind of all I'm going to discuss in terms of visuals, that sort of thing. Now, in terms of music, again, every time any semblance of 007 theme gets played, I seem to be getting copyright claimed, so this video also might get claimed, but oh well. Like I will say, that's kind of one of the things that's kind of irked my nerves, is that this series is officially my series with the most amount of copyright claims. Before, I forget which game it was, but no, okay. Technically speaking, my video for Daima technically still has the most copyright claims. But that is a singular video. As a series, this is the most copyright claims that I've gotten in a series. And that includes Abridged. because the bridge had only happened once. In this one, in this series so far, it's already happened twice, which is a little frustrating from my standpoint. Now going into gameplay, I'm going to be discussing 3 aspects of gameplay here: the melee combat, the shooting combat, and then gadgets. So first, talking about melee combat. Melee combat is okay. In my personal opinion, the camera is a little bit too close to be doing melee combat with multiple enemies without a really good way of dealing with multiple of them. Also, the game doesn't necessarily tell you that you can use gadgets for a lot of group encounters, because keep in mind, some group encounters you cannot use your gadgets for. It does feel a little bit finicky on which encounters you can use gadgets for, which ones you can't. So it actually did take me quite a substantial amount of time to figure out that, hey, for at least most fights, I can use like a smoke bomb in a group of enemies. However, this was another issue that I had with God of War Ragnarok, and some other games as well, where the camera is too close to be dealing with a lot of different enemies. Usually, though, games will circumvent this by having skills that do sort of an AoE sort of thing around the player to try to circumvent that issue, or, you know, blinding, that sort of thing. So that is something to keep in mind. It felt a little bit weird at times. Also, sidestepping was not super duper consistent, which is why most games do not do that. But having to sidestep the grabs, it felt very weird to have it be angular, because I don't play arena fighters or anything like that. I also have never played Hitman game, so that is something to consider here, as well as when I'm talking about gameplay. That's going to be the case with a lot of people that play this game, but the sidestepping did feel a little bit clunky at times. Now, which is why as y'all have seen in the playthrough so far, I just kept getting grabbed after grabbed after grabbed, because a lot of times it wouldn't register. Also, parrying is a little bit, you have to press it pretty precisely. Well, not pretty precisely, but like, if you press it too early, you're just fucked. You're just completely fucked. And a lot of that, especially if there's more than one enemy, you are just getting comboed up to death if you miss one. I would have preferred there would just have been a block button, and then, you know, you can time it from there, but you can just still block. Torchic is more adept at melee combat than I am, but melee combat is where I really struggled here. Now, in terms of shooting combat, here's what I'm going to say. It probably has some of the worst shooting controls that I've ever had on a controller. I don't think it's even that close. Now, keep in mind, I have not played a Hitman game, so maybe it's similar to that, but there's a few aspects of here that I did not like. This is probably my biggest complaint with the game as a whole, is the gun combat specifically, because you cannot reload unless you're ADS. Why? Also, why does most weapon types have 2 different ammo types? Being shotguns, 2 different ammo. SMG, 2 different ammo. Like, assault rifle, 2 different assault rifles. But you cannot get, like, what are we doing? Like, I can't pick up the other shotgun shells. Like, I have to pick up this specific shotgun as a copy in order to get ammo for it. And it's, the most egregious case is with the pistol specifically. Why can't I just pick up general pistol ammo? To me, that's a little problematic. The game really kind of tries to force you to swap guns as much as possible, when it's like, I would prefer to be able to build in either or direction instead of being pigeonholed and really forced into having to use that specific gun and just swap. Like, they try to do something similar to like Halo and some other games, but with Halo, you can honestly use. You can swap between, generally speaking, like 2 or 3 guns, 2 guns pretty comfortably. But in 007, especially because enemies generally don't use the same gun type. Now, you can have 4 enemies in the same room, and they will all be using different SMGs. So it's like, why can't they just all use the same SMG? Like, what are we doing here? So yeah, in terms of that aspect, it doesn't feel particularly great. So yeah. However, when you get used to it, it does start to get a little bit pretty good at that point. But it took me a long time to get used to it. Now, onto the gadgets. The gadgets is honestly probably one of the stronger points. The dart phone, I didn't use that much. The basic Q watch is, of course, very, very useful distraction. I love it being used in puzzle elements. The gadgets that I generally ran with is, at first, I did not like the smoke pod, because in the hotel level specifically, I kept getting spotted while using the smoke pod for some reason. So once I kind of figured out, how to use it properly, it was pretty good. Flashlight was the only one I didn't really find a use for, and I didn't bother to get good at it because I prefer the smoke pod, and my electric got completely claimed by the laser strap. So laser strap is really, really good. It's especially useful for instead of having to kick doors that are locked and causing guards to see you and whatnot, you can just laser it, open it quietly. It, helps a little bit on the stealth department. And it's useful for against enemies as well. You can blind them real quick. Very, very good. And of course, the missile pen is great for combat and whatnot, but you do not unlock that until much, much later into the game. However, I really, really enjoyed the gadgets and how they were used for the most part. And it wasn't like, okay, you have to use this gadget to solve this problem. It was like, okay, you can do this thing, or you can use a different gadget to do this. Like, there was multiple routes to different objectives, and when it was more streamlined, it didn't take me out of the game or anything like that. So, there is that. Now, we're going to go ahead here and get into the story. Now, the story, I'm going to first talk about non-spoiler aspects of the story. Now, keep in mind, I'm old for here in terms of characters. I'm going to talk about M, Moneypenny, and Q first. They are mainstays in almost every single Bond movie. Now, I'm going to adjust them into terms of their stocks. Now, over the course, I love Q. First off, Q, they did a beautiful job with Q and Moneypenny. Beautiful job. Moneypenny stocks go up as the game progressed. I started to like Moneypenny more and more as the game progressed. And Q, of course, she just rose, but I always like Q, so, love Q. I wish she was in the game a little bit more often, but, that's just me personally. However, M started to go downhill for me. There is, and again, I'm speaking generally here, but there are quite some frustrating decisions that she makes in this game that I don't think really even make logical sense. So, I really started to dislike her as the game progressed. Now, in terms of Greenway, I'm just going to mention their stocks going up and down. Like, Greenway, his stock does go up. Emma is kind of the only character, in my opinion, that I started to dislike as the game progressed. And I started to kind of frustrate it with her. Now, in terms of Bond tropes and that sort of thing, they do most of the Bond tropes. They do most of them. And they reference them quite heavily here and there. Now, however, there is a major Bond trope. It is an infamous Bond trope that is not in this game. And I'm going to say this right now. Usually this is not something that I will mention it, but when you have finished the game, it becomes kind of obvious because you're expecting this Bond trope to be filled at least at the end, and it just never is. I'm not going to precisely say what that trope is because it does spoil some story stuff, but all I'm going to say is it does feel very DEI. In case you don't know, that it's diversity, inclusivity, in terms of certain groups being protected from certain things from happening. When you do not fulfill this Bond trope and you have established that you pretty much refuse to, because this is one of the most infamous Bond tropes of all time. Like you watch a Bond movie, this is what you expect. In this story, however, it lowers the stakes, especially, after seeing the playthrough or whatever. It's a little bit more difficult to get invested in certain sections of the game upon a repeat playthrough. Even though I like replaying games in order, be like, okay, so they built up to it this way. They built up to it this way. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now, however, replaying through certain sections of the game, it's kind of just like, why did they even bother with this if they're not even going to do it? Why did they even bother with this section if they're not even going to do it? Why did they even bother teasing this when they're actually not going to do it? And in my personal opinion, they pivoted so hard from this trope. For my personal opinion, I think they snuffed out some good story potential for a sequel. Now, of course, I'm not going to say that, story like sequel is not going to be good or anything, but this kind of majorly pissed me off, not fulfilling that Bond trope. But that's kind of all I'm going to say about that. However, generally speaking, story's pretty good. Bond as a character, I really do like this version of Bond as well. Very enjoyable, especially as a young Bond. I expect to see more of a suave Bond in the sequel, but I enjoyed Bond's character in this game as a whole. So there is all of that. Now, in terms of Bond villains, not super duper well built up. The Bond villains' motivations are there, and elements are there decently early, and if you know, you're gonna pick up some things on a repeat playthrough. It's like, oh, this is a reference to that. However, even though it's a reference to that Bond villain's evolution, it low-key kind of comes out of nowhere. And when you really start playing replaying the early sections again, because that's what I've been kind of doing with Torchic, the Bond villain is not very well built up at all. Not very well built up. That's kind of where I'm going to leave it here. That's kind of where I'm going to leave it here. The game really starts to stumble toward the tail end. It starts to stumble, regains a little bit. It's kind of like a toddler where it stumbles, then gets back up. Stumbles, gets back up. Its strongest section is definitely the first act. The first act, in my opinion, ends at the hotel. I think the second act is, again, stumble, walk, stumble, walk, stumble, walk. I think there's a particular section at the later half of, like the later side of Act 2, early section of Act 3 that I also think is pretty strong. There is an identifier in there in terms of what characters are present, and when they are not present, the story does suffer because of it. But that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of non-spoiler territory. All in all, in terms of giving quick scores here before I start talking about scores, in terms of visuals, I'm going to give it like a 7. Mainly because of those long load times really do not feel great. But in terms of gameplay, as a whole, I'm gonna give it about an 8, mostly because the gadgets kind of carry it pretty hard. So in terms of gameplay, I'm gonna give it about 8, and the bombastic sections are really good. Now in terms of story, I'm gonna give it about a 6 here as a whole, but like not bad. But keep in mind, 5 is average. 5 is what I consider to be average. So I'm just gonna say slightly above average. Again, good moments. If the game stopped after the second act, I think I would have it a lot higher, but yeah, I think it's about a 6. Still would recommend this game. Is it game of the year? No. Is it the best game of the year so far? Yes, because I am going to say it's better than Lego Batman. But is it going to be my game of the year? Probably not. Again, Wolverine Phantom Blade Zero coming, so it's not going to be game of the year for me personally. Okay, but on that note, though, I do appreciate you for tuning in. If y'all have watched this far, I really do appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. But now we are going to talk about spoilers. So I'm going to give y'all a break to click. I'm going to give y'all some time. Click off the video. You know, leave a comment. Sorry, I don't want spoilers. Hey, I respect it. Okay, now we're going to start talking about spoilers here. So, and again, if you haven't played the game, and, you know, y'all don't really care about spoilers, that sort of thing, hey, this is that section for you. And you want to know what you're kind of getting yourself into. Now, in terms of the actual proper ending here, I'm not a huge fan of Isla staying alive. Not a huge fan. Because the Bond trope that never gets fulfilled is the Bond girl dies. The Bond girl has to die. The only exceptions to this have been if she's an agent for someone else. But there are a lot of girls that Bond has interactions with that I would define as Bond girls in a way. There's a lot of women that he has interactions with, like pretty heavy interactions with it, and none of them die. They get, so, like, a couple of them get into some perilous situations, but none of them die at all. And they only kill off men. Literally, they only kill off men. They go out of their... some of the times, it feels like they go out of their way to never kill women. Torchic did kind of peep this as well with Cassida specifically. They killed off Monroe and kept Cassida. In my personal opinion, I thought it would have been... I think it would have been more of an interesting direction to actually have Monroe stay alive and Cassida die, because maybe you could have his spotlight go the rogue agent kind of way, or there's a little bit more interesting stuff to do with him. But you know, they just paralyzed Cassida. Like, the first section of the game feels very foreign from the rest of the game. The only reason why it feels somewhat connected is because of Greenway specifically. But Monroe, I get his death. His death is not the one that I have the issue with. But Cassida being paralyzed is like, okay, But it would have been nice to have even seen her after this. She does not appear at all. I don't think her name even gets mentioned after the funeral scene. Outside of when Bond comes back to his apartment. Like, I'm being so serious. Like, she is not in the rest of the game. For no reason. Like, what are we doing? Like, yeah, she's paralyzed, but hey, you can have her be, like, intel support or something like that. Like a similar Moneypenny or something. You can have her do something in the plot. Let Q have her, give her, like, a gadget wheelchair. That's a thing in the movies, by the way. There is a gadget chair. So, to me, that's a little upsetting. And Isola not dying is like, what the fuck are we doing here? What the fuck are we actually doing here? Like, that's kind of where I really started to get pissed off. Especially, like, after Greenway's death. I feel like Greenway had a lot more, like, sure, his character arc had just finished, so that's the only reason why I'm not more angry about it. But, yeah, Greenway should not have died. Point blank, period. There was a lot of opportunity to see his arc, like, truly finish and, you know, like, all the way through. But it's like, just like, it's kind of like ending a story super duper early, if that makes sense. It's kind of like ending the Namek saga the second Goku spirit bombs Frieza. And then Super Saiyan and the rest of that doesn't happen. Like, that's kind of what it felt like. Like, sure, at that point, Frieza dead, right? Like, air quotes, like, let's just assume Frieza died there. But there was more potential after that. And that's how I feel with Greenway. In terms of, there's more stuff you could have done with Greenway after that. And it served no purpose in terms of motivation. We already had enough motivation to do stuff and whatnot. It was depressing, of course, and whatnot, but why didn't you kill off a Bond girl? So that massively pissed me off. Especially because that is quite a substantial trope. Like movies has opened with it, and you know, I think the Pierce Brosnan movie is called No Time. I don't know if it's called No Time to Die or something like that. But the Bond girl was she was like a crime boss or something like that, and yeah, she had to die. So this game completely avoids it. It does feel very out of place. Also, there are no female soldiers whatsoever. There are no female enemies as a whole. You can only beat up on male characters and whatnot. Like, sure, would it be a little out of place for Bond to beat up some women? Yes. But not having any female soldiers whatsoever, and it's also not like we haven't had female Bond villains, because we have. Especially, like, 1B Bond villains. Like, a lot of the times, they are women. Also, in this game, Webb is not built up very well at all, at least in my personal opinion. Damien comes out of nowhere. I'm not joking. Damien just comes out of nowhere. You do not see him before, like, you don't see him at all before he's revealed to be a villain. Which is a little bit odd for a Bond villain. Usually, a Bond villain will be there from the beginning. Like, usually you will see the Bond villain very, very early on. You might suspect that he's a Bond villain, or might not know properly that he's a Bond villain, but a Bond villain is there very early on. And Damien was just not. Also, Webb is not super present until, like, he really becomes a villain. But again, Webb doesn't really feel like he's a villain. I just gotta be real here. Webb is a very lackluster Bond villain. Damien is a lot closer to being a Bond villain than Webb is. And Webb is there for way longer, he's there way earlier than Damien is. But yeah, those are my spoiler thoughts of the game. Those are my frustrations with the game. But all in all, I think the game is pretty good, especially for a first-time playthrough. In terms of replay playthrough, I don't know yet. But yeah, so not net though. Do appreciate y'all for tuning in, and I will catch y'all on the flip side.